Thinking about the state of the nation after 50 years? Wondering if the pirates are still here trafficking treasures? Pause. Think about it with intentional thought and consider where we go from here. Stay tuned and hear what the ACP Belle, Wellington and Rose Hepburn got to say about child sex trafficking and abuse.
Something to think about with Dale Happy Knowles. What we think, we become. What we radiate, we attract. What we imagine, we surely can achieve. Let's change the narrative, 242.
Welcome to Something to Think About with Dale Happy Knowles. We're here this evening and we're going to be having another bright and bubbly conversation under the tree with some very, 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 very prominent people in our society, all young people. You know, I like to hang out with the young people that make me look smart. You know, smart as in looks, because they're the ones who have the intelligence, not me. I'm just the mouthpiece for the show today. But join our co-sponsors, Dom Dev Enterprises and Page Investments, and our friends at Something to Think About as we have this discussion. And here, if we can add our good guests to the show for some, yes, there you go. We have the Indirah Belle, and she's the Assistant Superintendent of Police and the Trafficking and Persons Chairman attached to National Security. We have Mr. Wellington Hepburn and Ms. Rose Hepburn of Wellington Hepburn Internationals, and he's an HR consultant, leadership developer, author. They're both professionals, and he's a past Bahamas top 40, under 40, sorry. He's a top 40 of the under 40s. Well, there's plenty 40s. I'm not being 50s, so you got to figure out the next one ready. But, you know, for a man to be great, he must have a great woman on his side who understands her purpose in life, that the good Lord created her to lead. You know, like the Proverbs 31 woman, Rose Hepburn, the one, beauty one on the screen next to that man there, you know, she radiates that aura to me. And from the first time I met her, she has a Bachelor's of Arts in Commerce, and she also has an MBA, which means that there's smartness there. And you have a former manager in the healthcare arena, and a co-founder with her husband in Wellington Hepburn International. She is not, you know, one of those people who just idle and so forth and sleeping on her husband's treasures. You know, he got plenty treasures. That's why we talk about the pirates and trafficking and treasures. But, you know, don't let that meekness or that small stature deceive you. You know, this is a woman of purpose. And, you know, we're going to get into some of these things today. And a lady who is homeschooling her 3 children. So that tell you, you know, they don't play. You know, if you know about grandma under the tree and whatever, you know, homeschooling is not an easy job. And so, but the power of submission she understands in her favor big time. So for the 3 of you, we welcome you to Something to Think About, and we look forward to a joyful conversation.
Thank you for the opportunity, Dale.
Thank you.
Awesome.
One quick correction though. I was previously in hospitality, so not health, but hospitality.
Oh, hospitality. Okay,
Yes.
but you know, I never pass English, you know, so I'm not smart. So next week we will be celebrating, I think it's next week, 189 years of emancipation and circa 300 years when Woodes Rogers expelled the pirates. So are you hearing those sounds of freedom? You know those good sounds that we're all familiar with that carried Chris the Fireman Brown down the backstretch to victory. But you know, we also have this thing called the United Nations, and they have a convention that we signed on to on the rights of the child. Article 34, I think it is, that speaks to sexual exploitation. And in its summary, it says the government must protect children from all forms of sexual abuse and exploitation. So I have only heard about one case in the last few years that of mentor that speaks to trafficking, of someone being apprehended for trafficking. And so we know there's plenty talk about smuggling, and that's almost a daily thing. But then we see these big screens on the side of the road now in this modern Bahamas that light up more of the street than the street lights, and they're talking about missing people. So we want to have this discussion to help our public understand what we are dealing with in the Bahamas today, whether it's our problem or we inheriting it from somebody else and putting it on us, and what we could do to improve ourselves in this next 50 years, because we're celebrating 50 years of independence. And so this is going to be one awesome show that we look forward to and so forth. So SBI, I'm going to ask you the first question here is that, are these things the same? Trafficking, the smuggling, and is the missing people linked to any of this? Can you hear me?
Okay, well, there is a difference between trafficking in person and human smuggling, or they call it, and then you speak about missing persons, okay? And so when you look at trafficking, it is really, in a nutshell, it has to do with the buying and selling of human beings, and it's against their will. Okay. Trafficking involves labor trafficking. It involves sexual exploitation, and also something that it's called organ harvesting, where they would, use the organs of persons they buy and sell. Like, say, for example, if I were to do my presentation, like, say, for example, the cornea of a human eye in 2018 was sold around $25,000, and so people need organs for different reasons. And, so there is a black market demand for that. But when, again, moving back to explaining the differences between humans smuggling and trafficking, smuggling, on the other hand, it's an agreement that a person makes. It's and then they are doing this voluntarily. Okay, so say, for example, I want to be smuggled. Say I live in Jamaica and I want to come in the Bahamas. So what I would do is contract or make an agreement with a person to smuggle me into the country. So that's a violation of the sovereignty of the nation. When we talk about human trafficking, it's really a violation of a person's human rights. Okay, because slavery and subjecting people to buying and selling or exploiting them, it's against their human rights. The Bahamas has signed on to what is called the Declaration of Human Rights. So by virtue that you're a human being, you are subject to not being subjected to slave-like practices. No one should have control over you, treat you inhumanely, etc. So another thing as it relates to the similarities, both of them, of course, involves it's a for-profit business. You understand? So when they exploit, in the instance of trafficking in persons, they're generating money. And of course, when they move people against, into another country's border, that's for money. So they are profitable businesses. And of course, both of them involve human beings. And sometimes it involves a network of individuals. Sometimes it's just a lone trafficker or a lone smuggler. In terms of that is how they're similar. And then, so with human smuggling is the commodity of service, basically, service of movement, because I'm contracting you to bring me across the borders. And, when it comes to the commodity, in human trafficking, it is the actual human being that is the commodity being traded. Just say, for example, when you're talking about drug trafficking, is the drug is the commodity. When you're talking about firearms trafficking, the commodity is the firearm. So in
Right.
trafficking in person, the commodity is the human being. They are being bought, sold, and exploited and doing things against their will, if that
Awesome,
provides
awesome.
some clarity. And when we talk about, say, missing persons, I mean, there are a variety of ways that people go missing. But I know I would say in the Bahamas, the same unit that investigates what is called missing and exploited persons also investigates crime of trafficking. So more
Yeah.
than likely, when they receive a missing person complaint, they would to factor that in, that it's a possibility that this person could be a person that is being trafficked or disappeared as a result. So, but I know what we can do a better job of as an organization is, a lot of time we have a lot of runaways that we're dealing with, not necessarily that they are victim of a crime or so. More than likely they're just having some dysfunction at home, and sometimes they are runaways, and a lot of times the police, they would probably talk about them being missing and not reporting that they've been found, so that will clear up some of that.
Okay.
Yeah. So that brings the to highlight that the police really got a lot of things to consider on every single issue, and I might take my hat off to y'all for how y'all address all of these things and still get through keeping things within reason. We be fearful in some things, but you know we still love the fact that y'all we could sleep. Some places in the world you can't sleep. And, yeah.
Right.
All
So
walking on the streets safely, Dale.
Yeah.
yeah. So when we look at this, then is there a direct connection, or is that just sometimes there may be or may not be between what we see on the streets and what is happening? Is this industry? I call it industry because you say both are for profit or but for gain. But is this industry like where do we compare it to like tourism and the like in terms of money? For
Okay,
people to
right.
understand how big this is or how small it is.
Okay, so trafficking in person is considered the second largest organized crime,
Wow.
and it's in the world after illegal drugs and just before illegal firearms. So that put it in some context in terms of how much this, how this crime is, and how it's increasing. It's they say that it's a very rapidly increasing criminal enterprise, and an estimation of how much money it generates on an annual basis, it's 150 billion. So it's a very lucrative criminal enterprise.
Yeah, and is this a normal in our culture, or like the Bahamians, or are they more of the trap, the victims or the targets, or is it foreign persons traveling
Okay,
through the Bahamas?
so what we have seen in terms of what came to the attention of the police, most of our victims are non-Bahamians, but I would say to that Bahamians have been trafficked. We had, like you said, in 2021, two juveniles, and then we've also had a case involving an adult female Bahamian. So in both cases, they were trafficked by fellow Bahamians, but most of our matters that come to the attention of the police involve foreign nationals, person from other countries, particularly the Latin American and like other regional countries within the region, Latin American and the Caribbean region. Okay, and most time it involves like traffickers that have from the same country for the most part. Yes.
Okay, cool. Now on Saturday, we were blessed to be able to see this movie. I think it's called Songs of Freedom, and from our good guests here on the screen would have been sponsors of that opportunity. And so when we look at that movie itself, I haven't heard about one mentioning or seeing something that had such an experience where we have been explicitly and authentically and emotionally riveted to our seats for the duration of the movie. Since Jaws, I mean, I don't watch too much movies like these kind of movies, but if everybody remember Jaws and how everybody was just there, tuned right in, bam.
Listen,
And this movie got my attention like that, and so I thank you for bringing us to the movie and giving us the attention to understand what was happening in that light. And so when we look at that freedom, is this an exaggeration, the movie, or is this underplay of what is actually happening out there? Either of you could start. Yeah.
I'll start in a minute.
sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised in terms of what I saw, in terms of them not pleasantly surprised with the children being trafficked, but the fact that it was done clean in a clean way. So you, even if a child walked in the cinema, it wouldn't be like you shouldn't watch this, but it still got the message across. So I remember speaking to one of my friends just the other day, and I was telling her you should see this movie, and she was so surprised. She's like, "You saw it? I'm afraid to see it." And I was like, "Wow, you don't have to be afraid to see it," because after I saw it, I realized people have this imagination, like image in their minds what to expect. That kind of deters them from seeing it. But the producers did such a good job that the message is still seen across, but it's clean. And that's a good thing. But on the other side, and it kind of does downplay what really happens to those children. But we don't really expect or want people to see that because it's too traumatizing. So I think it does not show the true picture, but it still shows the truth behind what is truly happening, the extent of which is happening, and the rate of it is happening. And even one of the, not to have a spoiler, but one of the children's pictures said 3 years old as one of the children being trafficked, and that was a shock to me. I didn't, so you still get the information, but it's done in a clean way.
Yeah, and if I may add, I think what I appreciated about the film is that, one, it was a true story, so it wasn't fictional. This was something that Tim Ballard lived. He went through this, and it showed the extent to which this atrocity happens. What I also appreciated at the end of the movie is some of the facts that they provided. We won't spoil the movie for anyone on this particular thread right now in sharing any of that, but it just goes to create more awareness, because I believe as human beings, sometimes we don't know what we don't know. And until someone exposes us to it and reveals to us the extent of something, you can be completely oblivious. And Rose and I even experienced it. Like, you hear about human trafficking, you hear about child trafficking, you hear about sex crimes and things like that, but to see and feel the weight of it through that movie and other forms of media that we've taken in since was just such an eye-opener. And that is why we had to act and do something. As small as that event was, I mean, it impacted 30 plus lives and hopefully hundreds more.
It has generated conversation. Like, I go on Facebook and I see people who attended our event posting stuff about Sounds of Freedom and encouraging people to come and see it. So it really is a storyteller that has the power. So as we help tell the story, more people are telling the story for others to come and see it.
Yeah. One thing I will say, and I don't think that this is a spoiler, but the movie asserts that child trafficking human trafficking, and particularly child trafficking, is the biggest form of slavery that we have right now since official slavery was abolished. So that alone should tell us the magnitude of which this is a problem. And it appears to be an ever increasing one. So we have to create awareness surrounding it.
And the UN defines the child as somebody under 18, if I remember how I read that.
Yes.
SP, you want to add anything to that part?
Okay, what I would want to say is that human trafficking on the whole affects millions of people around the world. Okay, it is considered a transnational crime, and I believe that, say for example, as relates to combating human trafficking, we work closely with the United States, and they rate our country every year to make sure that we're doing well, right? Or each country is doing what they're supposed to do. In terms of combating the crime, you have to prevent it. So I'm here educating people about, or creating awareness about trafficking a person. You have, when victims are identified, you have to protect them. There are certain things that we provide for our victim. For example, housing, medical assistance, psychological services, financial support. And, there's a list of things that we do when educational, vocational training, if the need arise, because we want to make sure that they are empowered, and so that when they are when the case has been prosecuted, when they are reintegrated in society, they are able to be wholesome individual. So that's protection of our victims. We identify them. We have to prosecute persons in society found committing these crimes. That's key. And also, we are partners with different agencies, because no one agency has all of the skills or resources. So
Right.
when I talk about being the chairperson of the TIP task force, that is a multi-agency, multidisciplinary approach in terms of the coordination of services that is provided to these victims. So I definitely have lawyers that work very closely with the police to prosecute the crime of trafficking. I have doctors, nurses, you understand, a part of that, providing medical care, psychologists providing psychological care, say for immigration officers as relates to foreign national, with terms of providing legal status while the matter is being investigated. People from foreign affairs I also have, and they would do diplomatic communication, because sometimes it involves victims from other countries or perpetrators from different other countries, or we have to work together as a nation around the world to combat this crime. You
Yeah.
understand? So it's a very comprehensive approach when we deal with trafficking. And just like I said, it affects millions of persons, and it affects men, women, boys, and girls. You understand? Yes, he is focused on child trafficking, which means that if a person under 18 is exploited or trafficked,
Yeah.
and there are adults, mainly like 80% of the trafficking victims involve adult women and girls. But men and boys are also impacted, but it's not as impacted as females are disproportionately impacted by the crime.
And for commissioner to have the confidence to put you, I just got to take off my next hat, because I got just hearing you talk about this thing, and you've been chairman of all of that. And you aim at 30, 40, 25, 30.
Oh,
So, these are folks in the Bahamas, and so we always talk about our young people. No, get off that. We doing some things out here. And so
yes, we are.
let's focus on getting these things here and moving this country forward in big time. So one question on where do we sit? Because you're talking about the United States and those, they like to set up these charts with all these different grades and where who's sitting, we 130 something or the 130 29 or whatever. So where we sit in terms of all of this.
Okay. As it relates to trafficking or our country efforts to combat trafficking in person, we are top notch. They have what is called a tier 1 rating. And for the last 9 consecutive years, we have been tier 1, but there's always progress. So we are doing well as a country in terms of our efforts, but of course, there's always room for improvement, always. But in terms of us, we were being getting combating trafficking in persons right in terms of we've been identifying victims. Of course, it's a very underreported crime, and we can always do a better job. And because of the nature of the crime, too, sometimes people, when they are identified, they do not want to proceed with prosecution, and we cannot force them. But we have been identifying, we've been prosecuting perpetrators of the crime, and we've been protecting our victims, and plus establishing local and international partnerships.
Right. Awesome. Awesome stuff. So, Wellington and Rose now. I know you to be praying parents of high integrity and passionate about excellence. Is this why, what ASP has explained, why you are so passionate about paying it forward? Did that come as a result of the movie, or this is some personal experience, or like what?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, please. Yeah. I was going to suggest you do.
No. It's a mixture of both. Personal experience for me personally, I don't know how to explain it. It was just a feeling that I had. Like when I went to buy the ticket, I just got two, and I just felt within me like I want to buy more. I hadn't even seen the movie yet, but I just felt like that. So for me, I feel like that was the Holy Spirit telling me without me really knowing it was. And then another part of me is being a mother. I have a heart for children, and I hate to see children and seniors, actually, for that matter, the vulnerable people being misused, being abused, taking away the purpose, causing them to have fear. I know some friends and some family members that have been abused sexually, molestation, I mean. And so all of that combined, I think that's what drove me to really care more. But the initial one is definitely the feeling that I had when I was buying the ticket.
And folks, we didn't have any conversation on this before, so this is just, I wouldn't say no coincidence, but this had to be divine how the two things line up. What I was saying earlier about this young lady and what she's saying. So,
Oh,
well, you gotta top this now. I don't know how you can do that, but I mean,
no. Okay,
you're
well,
holding the show, the fort thing here, so we gotta, let's see.
no, we didn't talk about it
No,
before, not at all.
Not
But
at all.
I just that was my experience, and I
That's
know.
what I'm saying. We didn't talk. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no communication at all. And to add to it, I remember after we watched the movie, well, before that, Rose started talking about how we should do something more. But after the movie, I was listening to Rose in my right ear, and similar thing. I felt the Holy Spirit say, "Wellington, you need to do something." Now, the way that I talk to God and the way that God talks to me, we have a personal relationship. So I said, "Man, God, listen, I have a lot going on. I now in the time." He said, "No, calm down. I need you to hear me out. I need you to do something." So what do you need me to do? He said, "I need you to pay for a couple people to come see this movie." I said, "Okay, no problem." And I remember sitting there, it may have been about 15, 20 seconds more, and I heard the number 30. I said, "Okay, that's a little bit more than a couple, but we'll make this happen." And I leaned over to Rose and I said, "Rose, I hear you saying you want to do something." Because I think at first,
At first I wanted to do. At the end of the movie, they have a call if you want to pay it forward. So that means buy tickets for a family online who can't afford their own tickets. So whatever you purchase, then they could use. So we did a handful of that, but I just felt like that doesn't really feel like it's enough for the Bahamas because that's international. But then he came up with 30, and I was like, 30.
and then the ball just went forward from there. And we're just so grateful to be able to provide that opportunity for individuals. And we pray that the same urgency and fervor that we feel for this topic would be communicated to all that we invited, and also all that they share the message with.
If you can explain it better than I, the story of how we got all the way down to Miss Belle coming to join us 2 days before the event, which is unheard of because we need to go through a process to get governmental approval.
It's just incredible. I mean, we literally watched the movie 6 days before we did the event. So I remember we came home and I'm like, "Love, if we're going to do this, we have to move quickly." So we contacted our internal graphic design team. Our designer was able to get us a flyer the next day. We started sending messages out to individuals, trying to see who we can get coordinated to come see the movie. My brother, Donato Burton Hepburn, used to be a part of the government. He now works for the Canadian government in Toronto. And he said, guys, have you ever thought about tips? I said, well, what's tips?
I didn't even know what tips was.
What tip do you want to share? You want to give us some advice? He said, no, not that kind of tip. Have you heard about tips? And I said, well, what's that? And then he told us about how he was a part of the committee. He worked with the then, I think, head, who's now retired. And somehow, some way, we were mentioning it to a church member, and this church member,
That was our daughter's teacher, Sunday school teacher.
correct,
Because
was
she's a doctor actually for kids.
Yes,
She's
she
the
Yes.
patient for victims in these cases that have gone through child trafficking. And then she was like, well, the person you emailed has retired 4 years ago. So we were
Yeah.
waiting on someone that retired 4 years ago. And I was like, I have a contact for the present chairperson. Let me reach out to her.
yeah,
Yeah.
all 2 days before. So they'll, and
Then she
as well,
called me the next day.
we were on the other end, just like waiting with bated breath. And when we saw her response, we were like,
That
yes,
has to be God.
This
'Cause
is
she was
just-
just as excited as we were.
yes, and everything just lined up. It was
Yeah.
just confirmation.
Yes.
Just confirmation.
So ASP Bill, then, how did the police or the committee of the trafficking in persons connect with the movie? What
Well,
did it move with you? Yeah.
my perspective, it's based on a true story. It's very realistic in terms of what I've seen, in terms of how how the movie was made. And he has real information in terms of it being a multi-billion-dollar industry, in terms of how they are recruited, and the deception that is used to deceive persons, in terms of, because when you looked at the movie, the father, I think the recruiter used a method for them to be used as models or something.
Right.
And that is a very common way that the victims are lured, you know. And so the fact that he served in Homeland Security and was actually involved and investigated cases domestically, internationally, and still do investigations. I think that it's heaven sent. As a matter of fact, I'm so happy because on Sunday would be World Day Against Trafficking in Persons, and what we supposed to do as country who have signed on to the United Nations Trafficking in Person Protocol is to raise greater awareness about the plight of victims. So when somebody watch that movie, that is very realistic in terms of what goes on in the world of trafficking. You understand? And so it's like it was the first time that I have seen what I normally lecture about played right out in reality. So that was good for me. And with that said, too, World Day Against Trafficking in Person would be this Sunday. So I'm hoping that maybe, I think Wellington said that the movie would be out of theaters on Thursday. Is that correct? Or?
My last communication with Fusion was that it would be there until Thursday.
Right. And I know you're supposed to be doing some other
Yes, we're gonna
communication,
follow up.
please, because that's a
Yeah.
real realistic way that trafficking occurs, and people can use that to be better educated. And so I have even, without even connecting with the Hepburns, I had done a flyer for community engagement around this event, and I was saying, see a movie, a trafficking in persons movie, and I mean on July 4th.
Oh,
It
wow.
came out Independence, and I connected with you the next day. You understand? Because I would recommend that people go and see it to have a realistic idea of what really goes on, around the world in terms of child trafficking and trafficking in general. on the whole. So, and to that too, that's one way of raising awareness. And then I also want to work with religious organizations for that day too, to say a prayer for victims, because, you know, prayer is powerful, you know and
Right.
so that day falling on a Sunday, I want to engage the religious activity. So I did prepare a flyer with a prayer, or the religious community could probably devise their own prayer, but that's a start, and it's a very good prayer. As a matter of fact, we completed the flyer today. I got approval from the ministry management, and so I'm going to distribute that. I want to partner with churches um, around the country, in terms of just taking a moment to say a prayer for victims and survivors of trafficking. And
Right.
then I have some other ways that the public can be engaged. Say, for example, visit our website. We would do a launch, I'm thinking tomorrow, because I just wanted to get some other materials on the website before we launch. And it's going to be www.bahamas.gov .bs /tips. So when you go to that website, you will have information on trafficking in person, the law, the reports, the assessments of the U.S. report. You'll be connected to our international partners, our local partners, because it takes a host of government and non-government agencies to combat trafficking. And so you would be get all sorts of information as relates to trafficking in general, labor trafficking, child trafficking, and we have them also in different languages for the Creole community, Chinese community, Spanish community. All right. So I just want to go through some of the things, if you would allow me, in terms of how we want to engage the public
Okay.
with more, trying to get more awareness around the issue. So of course, I did tell them, well, World Day Against Trafficking in Person was started as a result in 2013 by the UN General Assembly, and it was to raise awareness about the plight of trafficking victims. Okay. And I also give information about, I don't know if you can see this little heart,
Yeah.
that's the
Okay.
trafficking symbol. And what that represents is that it's a symbol for trafficking in person, and the symbol represents um, solidarity with the victims, and the cold heartedness of those who buy and sell human beings. Okay, so anytime you see that, that is representative of trafficking in persons or human trafficking. And so, what we want, we made some suggestion in terms of how you can get involved as community partners. And so, we said to become more informed about trafficking in persons. Of course, I provide the website when you can visit the website, read a survivor story. And we have a link. You can just put the link on the fly into your search bar, and you can read stories of real victims and how they were trafficked, their experience, and what advice that they have. Okay. Um, of course, I want parents to involve their children, and you would know the indicators of trafficking, you know. So, host a tip training, and we at this ministry will do that for you. You understand? So you can involve your church groups, your civic organization, or just a group of
Right.
friends, or how we are doing this broadcast today. Watch a trafficking in persons movie, example sound of freedom.
Right.
Yes. Okay, wear shades of blue. Like how all week I was wearing shades
Oh,
of
I got
blue,
them blue today.
That's
and
Yeah.
nice.
I
Very.
want you to take photos with the hearts, some creative
Okay.
ways, and then you can send it to our website so that we can see that some persons were out there, or place a blue heart on your Facebook, your WhatsApp, or on the door of your home or business. You can do that. Um, we also talk about Pink the Islands blue, just
Ooh.
using blue lights,
Right. You know, there's a
and
mix that
we're
up with something
partnering.
else.
with Atlantis. So on that day, the hotel will be in blue, and that could spark conversation for the employees and guests.
That's
And
true.
I'm also doing a training session with their general manager and other persons within the hotel industry on Thursday. And then we said we are having a scavenger hunt for our school age children. Okay. And of course, community members, if you suspect an incident might be a trafficking victim, call the relevant authorities. That's your civic duty. You know, if they say if you see something, say something. You understand? So, and I definitely have all of the contacts. You can call the police. Some people might not feel 100%, oh, I don't call the police. Well, there's the national hotline that is run by the social services because they are on my team. Because once a victim is identified, just like how we have an investigator assigned, there is a social worker who is assigned to that victim to navigate. They work very closely with my team, and we navigate government services for them. So if they were supposed to go to a doctor visit or the social worker will go with them. If they have to go to court, the social worker is right there. Or even when the police is dealing with them, they're right there. They're like an advocate for that victim. Okay.
Okay.
And there's also our hotline and WhatsApp line on this and the Bahamas Crisis Center, because the Crisis Center is a non-government agency that we also partner with to provide counseling. Because in some instances, victims suffer what is called trauma.
Right. I
You
wanted to get
know?
into that with you in a
Exactly.
second. So,
All right.
yeah.
Okay.
So
May
if
I
we look at
add?
this then, in terms of what TIP and WHI is doing in this whole to do, and seeking to achieve the support and the sponsorship of paid forward initiatives that was done on Saturday. The responses that you got from people in your spaces, your individual spaces, what was that like from the event and also from the walk since you would have done the last set of teaching?
You want to
Go
start?
ahead.
Immediately after the event, I won't call the person's name, but one individual came to me and she said, Wellington, my life is no longer going to be the same. And I don't say that to you just because you're a friend or a colleague or to try and make you feel good about this event, but it literally has shifted the way that I think about things. This individual was a female. She came to me and she said, Wellington, would you believe right after this movie, a child walked up to me with their 2-year-old sister and said, can you just take my sister in the washroom? Can you just help her go help her use the bathroom? And the person looked at the child and they thought to themselves, oh my gosh, this child has no idea who I am. They don't know what I can do to this child in the washroom. And she said she actually took the opportunity based off of what she learned from the movie to educate the child and say, hey, you might not want to do this because technically I could run away with this child. I can molest this child in the bathroom. I can do whatever I want and you would have no idea. I remember another colleague, again, won't call the person's name, but the individual came to me and they said, Wellington, I am someone who has children. And before this movie, obviously, I loved my kids, but it helped me to open up a part of my brain to the reality that these things can happen. And Dale, I kid you not, before watching this movie, I couldn't conceptualize the fact of one of my kids not being here. Like, it's still very difficult for me right now to, say we travel to a foreign country or something and we put one of the kids in daycare and we come back and they're just not there. So from this movie, I know that a lot of the friends and colleagues that we invited have said that it allowed them to just open up and change their perspective and be more aware of their surroundings, be more aware of, and I know we're talking particularly about child trafficking, and as Ms. Belle said, child trafficking is just a cross-section of human trafficking, but to be more aware of who are around their kids, even to be more intentional with things like, who do I allow in my home as babysitters? sometimes we just take these things so lightly, but we don't understand the ramification that it can have.
Right.
Someone said to me, again, won't call any name, she said, Wellington, this hit home for me because I was molested. This is one of my age-old friends, 20 plus years, grew up with this person in primary school. And she said, I was molested at the age of 6
Wow.
and sexually molested at the age of 6. And some of the things that I watched in this movie just brought back some of those memories, And now being a parent of 2 boys, I am just so much more vigilant. Now having gone through those experiences. So sometimes having information creates more awareness and more power.
And
Right.
another guest of ours said when we walked out of the movie that like somebody just almost gave me a heart attack just now because as soon as I walked out that movie and everything that I would have seen, they're like, "Excuse me, have you seen my my child walk? Is it a child?
Yeah.
Have you seen my child walk down this hallway?" And he was like, "Oh my gosh, my heart almost dropped because it's just so many people are looking for their kids in this movie just walked out of."
Yeah.
Another person was telling me that their hearts were broken and they had to collect themselves a while before they could do certain conversations and interviews that we were carrying on after the event. And so I think a lot of people were impacted, and also they raised their level of security for their own families, for the people around them. Now they can look around and not think that every man walking with a child that's their uncle or cousin. They can
Right.
possibly look for the signs, as Ms.
Yes.
Bell said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And may I add also the TIP website will also allow people who are doing activities or bring awareness to upload their events and their activities. And so we'll be doing that as well. So you can be able to view the event that we did with the collab with TIPS.
Yes, indeed, indeed. So, I mean, somebody spoke about child sexual abuse. That creates a vulnerability. For victims of trafficking. So all kinds of abuse, child neglect, maltreatment, domestic violence. All of these are what we call root causes. That could lead adults or child to be more susceptible to being victim of trafficking, even substance abuse. And so homelessness. So it's a variety of different kinds of things that make people more vulnerable. But there again, educate yourself, spend some time making inquiries about the indicators and how to make sure that you and your children are resilient against. Because I've done several seminar for girls because I had concentrated more on girls because they are disproportionately impacted. But I do want to do something for boys because boys are victims and they are also perpetrators. Girls also, because you can't believe that it's more female traffickers than male traffickers in our experience.
More females doing the trafficking.
Yeah,
Yes,
followed
yes,
by children apparently.
yes. Or they are involved because in
Right.
the last instance with the juveniles here in 2021, it was a female, a trusted friend, would traffic the 2 juveniles. So, but God, you just have to continue to pray and ask God, for protection. Continue the lines of communication with your children. You
Right.
understand? Make sure that you're communicating or you up to date with what's happening with them in general. You understand? Of course, praying for your children, praying with your children, that's very
Yeah.
critical. They say the family that prays together stays together. But I think that there's a lot of protection in that also, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, folks, when the show is as quiet as this in terms of comments, you're all saying some serious stuff that got these people just like bump, deer in headlights kind of thing because people like to comment, and
Right.
so we still encourage you to ask any questions that you might have feel that you need to ask or other like and so forth. And we're here with Assistant Superintendent of Police Indirah Belle and Wellington and Rose Hepburn. and we're talking about this issue that we have across the globe, but it touches us also, which is child sex trafficking and abuse. And so, what I wanted to ask on this item here would be is, how are these victims mentally affected? Because some months back we had a show that we spoke about, are they reaching out, acting out versus mental health issue. And it
Yes.
seemed like from the doctor who was on the show that a lot of the people aren't just acting out, they actually been traumatized by something and the like in our society. And so how does this touch us?
So as it relates to that, of course, it's trauma because sometimes it is the nature of what happens to these people while they're being trafficked because sometimes physical force is used, as a form to control their victim. Violence is perpetrated against them. Sometimes they use firearms, and sometimes there's deception. Sometimes they pretend as if they want to have a relationship or marry that person. And so there's a lot of shame surrounded. How can I be so stupid to fall for that? Even as it relates to false job advertisement, you come from uh, a country because believe it or not, the Bahamas, compared to other nations of the world, we do enjoy a relatively high standard of living. So some people come here are lured by the promise of no of a job, better way of life, providing for their family. And when they discover it's not a job that they're taking, they have to go be sexually exploited.
Right.
When they are sexually exploited, sometimes there's because it's for profit, they have a quota to meet. You understand? So that means that open up the for them to sleep with multiple partners. When you
Right.
expose to multiple partners, you can get diseases. You can have to deal with multiple pregnancies or abortion. So it really is a lot that they do deal with. So they are fearful, they're anxious, they're depressed. I'm not a mental health expert, but
Right.
of course, that's why we align ourselves also with the crisis center to counsel our victim and also with Sandilands, and to do psychiatric assessment of our victims or provide the psychological services that they require to become whole again.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I would
When
presume
when
there'd be a
sis-
lot of anger in there too, because
Yes,
all that shame, you just feel angry. I would assume.
right. So it's a
awesome.
whole host of different kinds of mental disorders, and sometimes because they have mental disorders, they are more vulnerable, or they are, you know, experience intellectual disabilities.
And I'm not sure how the stats would show if this is true, but I would. I think those who do not get the right treatment will go on to be the perpetrators over time, because statistics do show that women first are the perpetrators, followed by children, which I would think would be more juvenile, not the younger ones, but the older ones, the ones that have been in there for many years, maybe it's for 14, 15, 16-year-olds. They are used to lure more kids into it, and
In
maybe
some instances, yes, they do, and sometimes they are forced to do it.
yeah, okay, yes.
Yeah. So everything to do with trafficking, for the most part, it's like force, and it's against the person will. Sometimes they don't, and even if they do consent and enforce a fraud, coercion, manipulation, it's null and void. So if you have my consent to come over or you're working me against my will, it's almost like, say, for the example with police getting a confession statement and they use force.
Yeah,
That confession statement is null and void.
right.
Correct.
So if they are deceived in coming and then you traffic them, it's null and void to give consent.
I actually saw on YouTube the other day of I can't remember the name, but the person who's pushing to say that pedophilia is normal and it's fine. And their logic was, if a child can consent to ice cream, they can consent to sex.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, our laws are not like that. Thank you. No,
Thank
it's not.
God.
It's
Yeah.
not.
But
There's
that's
no.
what they're trying to say. Like that consent is actually
It's crazy.
acceptable, but it's not. It's coercion. It's
Yeah.
using a child's innocence, their lack of judgment, understanding of the world to trick them and manipulate them. So that's not true uh, consent.
Correct.
So
No.
that brings on the question then of the church and civic society and all those others other than the government and so forth. What is their take or what is their involvement in this whole process? I mean, are they
Involved,
engaged?
yes. We do have, for example, the Church of God very actively involved with the TIP task force. We have a member from that the Church of God Bahamas that's been serving on the committee from inception. And so they
Okay.
do a lot of organizing trainings for their congregants. Apart from that, I know they've in the past assisted with providing shelter for victims because sometimes when victims are rescued, we need like emergency shelter. And like I said, the Crisis Center, which is also a non-government organization, helps with counseling and other kinds of services, Link Surf House, the Red Cross with meals, clothing, Salvation Army meals, clothing, shelter. So they are doing their part. Because, like I say, it's not one agency that is able to do or address and combat trafficking.
Right.
It's a collaborative
Right.
approach, even across nations.
And I would go further to say, for those religious and civic and community organizations, if you don't yet have a partnership with TIPS, please know that you can reach out to Miss Indirah Belle and form that partnership. And I believe Ms. Bell and her team would welcome that.
Right. And internationally, I think there's an organization affiliated with the Catholic Church called Catholic Charities. A lot of those organizations have programs, that assist with the reintegration, job skills, and even shelters and things like that. That I would like to see more participation from non-government organization. Just assisting with programming for tip victims or domestic violence victims, and volunteering and supporting these kinds of organizations, supporting them financially, supporting them with your time, you know. So that is always a good thing in terms of how, or even sensitizing through preaching a sermon, so that people can know, exploitation, hurts the heart of God. He does not want people to be exploited in any shape or form.
Right. Like the movie says, God's children are not for sale. I think to
Exactly.
get ahead of that, we could probably do the training session where the children are taught what to do when a stranger approaches them, teaching them, it's not
Right.
okay to go to someone's car because they say, I have candy back there, come and get,
Right.
here's one, come and get more. Or, they approach children with a puppy dog and they would tell them, like, we have lots more in my trunk, can I come and see it in my car? And the kids will just be so, trusting and just follow. So maybe a training session to get ahead of it to the kids' side, not just the adults. And the
Right.
Right.
parents' role to now reinforce and to bring that into practice and into reality.
Mhm.
Because just telling kids does not work. Like I've seen enough, I've heard enough stories, I've seen enough videos where it's like I've told my children many times, don't go away with strangers. But then when they do like a trial or a test and they get approval from the parents to approach their child with something that will entice them, a puppy dog, a candy, whatever, they always fail. So it's almost like maybe we do a training and we get approval from the parents and we do it and test the child. And if they fail, do it another week or just until they get it. Because,
Exactly.
making it
Right.
practical is what really works, not just theory.
Exactly. You are correct.
As I'm
But
sitting here too, oh sorry, Dale.
go ahead, you go ahead.
As I'm sitting here, I'm also wondering, does TIPS either do this currently or see an opportunity to almost have like a certification program, almost like where you certify,
Like how you certify CPR and stuff like that.
yeah,
Or you
like
certify what? Like the
I don't know what it would be
Well,
called.
well, we can start. Like I said, the awareness training is very comprehensive,
Okay,
and so you can start there.
okay,
Yeah, you can definitely
Yeah.
start there.
okay.
Yeah. So I was going to just ask that if each of you could say something that you I ask you questions, but if it's something that you wanted to say, and maybe in that process, also give one or two tips as to what you think the public could be doing in order to improve this whole situation.
Yeah.
So,
I'll
Wellington,
let
you're
them.
shaking your head. We can start with you. Yeah.
Who's that? Me? We didn't hear
Yeah,
You
you.
said,
Wellington.
oh, you want to start with me? Oh, sure.
Yeah, yeah.
So what I will leave with everyone listening is that, and I said this on Saturday, there are individuals that talk about change, and then there are individuals that commit to change. And I believe that each one of us in the areas that we're in, the spheres that we're in, the people that we know, we can make a difference. So I want you to leave this podcast, this show, asking, what can I do, particularly in this week leading up to World Day for trafficking in persons? What can I do to help promote this message? What can I do, excuse me, perhaps on my social media? What can I do to speak to my friends, my coworkers, my church, to help advance this message? Because I really believe that if each one of us individually can commit to make one small change, we can transform the situation. The second thing that I would encourage you to do would be to check out the TIPS website. Ms. Bell, do you mind just giving us that URL again?
Okay, so it's www.bahamas.gov.bs /TIP, and that will be launched tomorrow. So we will go live with that. So that will have information, like I said, on our national legislation, different brochures and information on child trafficking, labor trafficking, sexual exploitation, and just things in general about trafficking in person. It will have information on our two national bodies. Trafficking in Person Interministry Committee would serve a different purpose than the Trafficking in Person TIP Task Force, which is like the operational body, but they are two national bodies. And then you can see who are the members of our TIP Task Force, and also ways to report suspected trafficking in persons crime.
Okay. And once you get to that web page, I want you to share it with one person.
Yes,
Share it
yes,
with one person,
yes.
and encourage them to share it with someone else. Well,
Yeah.
I would say um, for parents, maybe just speak to your children, listen to your children. Sometimes someone might not be trafficked out of the country, but wherever they go out to their uncle or to their family member, something is happening you're not aware of. So don't just take it for granted that their family, because sometimes it actually starts with people that the child or the family has gained trust from, and then it goes from there. Additionally, we are promoting still Sounds of Freedom, and we're
yes.
still looking to partner and collab with Tips to give away 5 giveaway movie tickets. So we're still going to further investigate with Fusion to see when the movie's really going to be on. I hope it stays longer than Thursday.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll be
And
right. Our kids are trying to chime into the conversation, so I just have to talk to
They
them.
did pretty well all this time, though.
yeah, so one thing I would also further advise in terms of the online behavior of children, parents need to monitor more closely who they are interacting with, the amount of time that they're spending online, who they're communicating with. Are they putting up their age to be in grown chat? I mean,
Yeah.
chat rooms where they shouldn't be. Are they befriending a stranger who's trying to befriend them, to meet up in reality? So
Right.
that is something else that, because children are being recruited by online recruiters, those who are playing games, because sometimes you don't know who that person is behind the screen. They can lie and say that they are this age or that age.
Right.
So the parents need to continue to monitor more closely those activities and making sure that children don't give out personal information online.
Right.
Yes, well, I would like to thank each of you for coming on the show to share your knowledge and all this information so that the Bahamas can be stronger as for it.
Yes.
And
Yes.
hopefully that we are able to save many, 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 many people from being victims of this heinous crime. that seem to be growing exponentially like weeds. And so we thank you all again. We're glad that we've now had a star join us, and that's the generation you'll be behind the mic soon and preaching, because I know that's in the wake somewhere. So we know that's going to happen. But thank you all. ASB, we look forward to the information that you're going to be posting so that we can post it on our page also, and can hopefully continue the conversation as we move forward from strength to strength. Madam Medusa, thank you kindly. Everybody out there on social media, Brother Howard Barrett, I saw you come up a couple of minutes ago as everybody was talking and you had to go. But love you all, from Dubai straight to Canada to the United States to UK, all of you around the world who will be tuning in. Quiet today, but I don't know what happened, but these may be too much knowledge coming at your way. But we love you all the best. Till next time, see you all. Enjoy.
Yes, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
How do you?
Enjoyed the show? Then subscribe to us for more educational and inspirational content. Ring the bell so you never miss a show. Let's change the narrative, 242.